My dad sent a group text. Since you're never around, we've transferred control of the family business to your sister. My mom added, she actually earned it. You just got lucky. I didn't respond. Just opened the banking app and disabled the payroll account I'd been personally funding for 10 months, $8,000 per month. A week later, my sister called me at 2 a.m. None of us got paid. What did you do? I just texted back. Good luck earning it now. I, 30M, stared at the group text that popped up on my phone during what should have been a routine Tuesday afternoon. Dad had sent it to the entire family chat, and Mom had immediately chimed in with her addition. The words hit me like a physical blow, but what surprised me most was how calm I felt reading them. I'd been running the financial backbone of our family's small manufacturing business for almost a year now, ever since the pandemic nearly killed it. While my sister had been handling day-to-day operations and my parents managed the administrative side, I'd been the one quietly keeping everyone's paychecks coming. $8,000 every month, transferred from my consulting business account to theirs, ensuring the payroll never bounced. My parents didn't know the exact details of how I was keeping things afloat. They knew I was helping financially, but they assumed it was maybe $1,000 here and there, not the substantial monthly lifeline that was literally keeping their business breathing. My sister certainly didn't know. She was too busy taking credit for the company's stability to ask uncomfortable questions about where the money was actually coming from. The accusation that I was never around stung because it was technically accurate but missed the entire point. I lived 2 hours away in the city, building my own career as a software consultant. I couldn't be physically present for every family dinner or weekend gathering, but I'd been more present for their business than any of them realized. Every month, I'd review their books remotely, identify the shortfalls, and cover the difference without fanfare or requests for gratitude. I'd started helping after Dad had a mild heart attack last year. The stress of potentially losing the business that had been in our family for 15 years was visibly killing him. Mom had confided in me during one of her rare moments of vulnerability that they were 3 months behind on payroll and didn't know how they were going to tell their 12 employees. That's when I stepped in, quietly and without conditions. My sister had always been the golden child, the one who stayed local, who showed up to every family event, who made all the right noises about family loyalty and tradition. She'd moved back home after college and gradually inserted herself into more and more aspects of the business. She was good at the operational stuff, I'll give her that. She knew the employees, understood the production schedules, and had genuine relationships with their long-term clients. But she'd also developed an inflated sense of her own importance. Every month when the business stayed afloat, when payroll cleared without issues, when they managed to invest in new equipment or take on bigger contracts, she saw it as validation of her leadership. She'd started making comments at family gatherings about how she was really the one holding everything together, how some people contributed through presence and dedication, while others just threw money at problems. The irony wasn't lost on me that throwing money at their problems was exactly what had been saving them. I sat in my apartment for about an hour after receiving that text, just thinking. Part of me wanted to call them immediately and explain everything. Part of me wanted to drive the 2 hours home and have it out in person. But there was a third part of me, a part that had been growing quietly for months, that was tired of being taken for granted. So instead of responding to the group text, I opened my banking app and navigated to the automatic transfer I'd set up 10 months ago. $8,000, scheduled to transfer on the 25th of every month to cover their payroll gap. I'd been so systematic about it that I'd even built in a small buffer. Their actual shortfall was usually closer to $7,000, but I'd rather over-contribute than risk someone's paycheck bouncing. I disabled the transfer. Then I disabled the backup transfer I'd set up in case the first one ever failed for technical reasons. Then I went into my business accounting software and removed their payroll as a recurring expense category. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes to undo 10 months of financial support that had been keeping their family legacy alive. I didn't feel angry exactly. I felt something closer to relief. For 10 months, I'd been carrying the weight of their business's survival while maintaining the fiction that I was just the absent son who cared more about his city life than his family responsibilities. Now they wanted to make that fiction official by transferring control to my sister, and they wanted to do it with a side of moral superiority about who had really earned what. The next week passed normally for me. I had client meetings, worked on a couple of coding projects, went to the gym, met friends for drinks. I didn't think about the family business or wonder how they were handling payroll. I trained myself over the past year to think of that $8,000 as just another business expense, so not transferring it felt like canceling a subscription service I no longer needed. My sister's call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday night. I was half asleep when my phone rang, and I almost didn't answer. But something about the late hour made me think it might be an emergency. Her voice was panicked in a way I'd never heard before. She'd been at the office late trying to figure out why their payroll account was short, why the automatic deposits that always seemed to just work had suddenly failed. She'd spent hours on the phone with their bank, convinced it was a technical error. It was only when she'd gone through months of bank statements that she'd discovered the pattern of my transfers. She asked me what I'd done, her voice oscillating between anger and desperation. She wanted to know why I'd stopped the transfers, when I was going to restart them, whether this was some kind of negotiating tactic to get more control over the business. I told her I wasn't going to restart the transfers. I explained that since the family had decided I wasn't really contributing and that she had earned control of the business, she was now free to earn the financial stability that came with that control as well. She tried to argue that I was being petty, that I was hurting our parents and the employees who depended on the business. She reminded me that Dad's health couldn't handle this kind of stress, that Mom had been bragging to her friends about how well the business was doing, that 12 people were going to miss mortgage payments if I didn't fix this. I acknowledged that those were all serious concerns, but I pointed out that they were now her concerns as the person in control of the business. I'd been handling those concerns for 10 months without recognition or even basic awareness from the family. Now she had the opportunity to step up and find solutions. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me. Update 1. The next morning, I had 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. Dad had called me 8 times, Mom had called 6 times, and my sister had called 3 more times. The text messages ranged from pleading to angry to accusatory. Dad wanted to know if this was really about the group text, if I was really willing to destroy the family business over hurt feelings. Mom's messages were more direct. She called me selfish and said I was proving their point about my priorities. My sister's texts were the most interesting. She'd clearly spent the night researching their financial situation more thoroughly. She discovered that my contributions hadn't just been covering payroll shortfalls. They'd been enabling the business to take on larger contracts, invest in equipment upgrades, and build up a small emergency fund. Without my monthly transfers, they weren't just going to struggle with payroll. They were going to have to fundamentally restructure their entire operation. I responded to Dad with a single text explaining that I'd been supporting the business financially for 10 months, that I'd never made this support conditional on recognition or control, but that I also wasn't going to continue funding a business that I'd apparently never been truly involved in. I told him I loved the family and wished them success, but that they'd made it clear my contributions weren't valued or even noticed. I didn't respond to Mom's messages at all. I sent my sister a longer message acknowledging that the situation was difficult, but pointing out that she'd spent months talking about how she was the one really running things. Now she had the chance to prove it. I offered to have a conversation about the business situation, but only if it started with an acknowledgement of what my contributions had actually been. Update 2. 3 days later, my sister showed up at my apartment. She'd driven the 2 hours after work, and she looked exhausted. She'd clearly been crying, and she started crying again when I opened the door. She apologized. She said she'd never known about the monthly transfers, that she'd assumed the business was just doing better than she'd realized. She'd been taking credit for financial stability that she hadn't created, and she felt horrible about it. She begged me to restart the transfers, at least temporarily, while she figured out how to actually make the business profitable enough to cover its own payroll. I invited her in and made coffee. We talked for about 3 hours, and it was probably the most honest conversation we'd had since we were kids. She admitted that she'd been feeling insecure about her role in the family and had been overcompensating by taking credit for everything that went well. She also admitted that she'd encouraged Mom and Dad to send that group text because she'd been feeling threatened by what she perceived as my attempts to control the business from a distance. I explained that I'd never wanted control of the business. I just wanted to help keep it alive while building my own career. I'd been happy to support them financially without recognition, but I wasn't willing to continue that support while being accused of not caring or not contributing. We worked out a compromise. I agreed to restart the transfers for 3 months, but with full transparency about what I was contributing and why. She agreed to take over communications with our parents about the business situation and to work on developing a plan to make the business self-sufficient. Most importantly, she agreed that any future family discussions about business control or contributions would include all the relevant financial information. Update 3. The family dinner 2 weeks later was awkward but productive. My sister had prepared a presentation, an actual PowerPoint presentation, breaking down the business's finances over the past year. She showed exactly where my contributions had gone, how they'd enabled the business's growth, and what the realistic timeline looked like for achieving self-sufficiency. Dad looked shell-shocked. He genuinely had no idea how close the business had come to failing or how much I'd been contributing to keep it afloat. Mom was defensive at first, but gradually acknowledged that they'd made assumptions about my priorities that weren't fair or accurate. The group text that had started everything was never directly addressed, but Dad sent me a private message later that week thanking me for everything I'd done and apologizing for not recognizing it sooner. Mom took longer to come around, but she eventually sent her own apology, though it came with some continued commentary about communication and family involvement that showed she still didn't entirely get it. My sister and I continued our monthly check-ins about the business situation. She was actually really good at the operational improvements needed to reduce costs and increase efficiency. By month 2 of our 3-month agreement, they'd reduced their payroll gap from $7,000 to $4,000. By month 3, they were down to needing about $1,500 in support. I continued the transfers for 2 additional months beyond our original agreement, gradually reducing the amount as their situation improved. By the 6-month mark, they were covering their own payroll and had even managed to build a small emergency fund. The family dynamic shifted permanently. My parents stopped making assumptions about my commitment level based on my physical presence, and my sister stopped treating family contributions like a zero-sum competition. We established regular family business meetings, conducted via video call so I could participate from the city, where major decisions were discussed openly and all contributions were acknowledged. I never asked for control of the business, and they never offered it. My sister had genuinely earned the operational leadership role, and she was good at it once she stopped feeling like she had to prove herself by diminishing everyone else's contributions. Dad gradually transitioned into more of an advisory role, which was better for his health and stress levels. Mom focused on the administrative side and client relationships, which had always been her strength. The $8,000 I'd been transferring monthly went back to growing my consulting business. Within a year, I'd expanded enough to hire 2 additional contractors and take on larger projects. The financial discipline I developed while supporting the family business actually helped me manage my own business growth more effectively. Looking back, that group text was probably the best thing that could have happened to our family dynamic. It forced all of us to be honest about contributions, expectations, and respect. My parents learned that physical presence isn't the only way to show family commitment. My sister learned that real leadership means acknowledging everyone's contributions, not just claiming credit for outcomes. And I learned that helping family doesn't mean accepting disrespect or invisibility. The family business is still running, still employing 12 people, and actually more profitable now than it was when I was subsidizing it. My sister sends me quarterly reports, not because I require them, but because transparency has become our new normal. Dad's health has improved significantly since he's no longer carrying the daily stress of financial uncertainty. Mom has started acknowledging my contributions in conversations with extended family, though she still sometimes adds commentary about how I could visit more often. I still live 2 hours away in the city. I still can't make every family dinner or weekend gathering. But now when I do visit, it's as someone whose contributions are recognized and valued, not as someone who needs to prove his commitment to people who've already decided he doesn't care enough. The revenge wasn't the point, really. The point was establishing that support and recognition need to go together, that family loyalty works both ways, and that assumptions about people's priorities can be costly when they're wrong. Sometimes the most effective way to demonstrate your value is to temporarily withdraw it, not out of spite, but out of self-respect.